I'm in conversation with Arun Maira about my new book, The Difficulty of Being Good. Arun.
Gurcharan, you have written in your book about the condition of our times, which is not too dissimilar in terms of human frailties to the conditions of the times when the Mahabharata came about. The story was written about. Envy, greed. And I was quite struck about you. Your book, India Unbound, has been a great bestseller and continues to be dipped into by people when they want to understand how India has become unbound and grown. It was a release of animal spirits, as it were, to shut the government off. And you quite often said, when we put the government to sleep, now we can get to work. So we've released all these spirits. And you refer to, in India Unbound, Raju, the little boy in the south, who maybe it's envy of Bill Gates. It's a sweet envy of Bill Gates. He wants to be Bill Gates.
It's the positive side of envy, ambition.
Exactly, yes. And then you talk in the opening of this book about the other Raju. What happened last year?
Ramalingam Raju.
Ramalingam Raju, late last year and early this year in India, who was pursuing a dream also in the software sector, maybe the Bill Gates sector, and was getting pretty well known, and a philanthropist too. But something really went wrong there. And you've explored what could have been going wrong inside Ramalinga Raju and within his family. A little Mahabharata there also. But there's a sentence you use somewhere in your book, in the introduction or in the conclusion, I could find it, saying the first one, India Unbound, was about Artha, the release of Artha. And what you wish now to get back Dharma into India with this book, because what seemed to have been overtaken by Artha was this conscience, the desire to do good and be good, and not just to make good, which I think has become too much.
And that's, of course, a very important sort of part of this book, that here we've released these energies for the first time, and that's why we've experienced a 9% growth rate for 5 years. But there is a line, there's a very fine line, a balance that we should not cross, that even the best of ambition can get corrupted, which is what happened in the case of Ramalingam Raju. And most people think that Ramalingam Raju's story is really about greed. Actually, what the Mahabharata does, because I've been so involved in the Mahabharata, it's made me more conscious of what really are the moral failures involved. And in the case of Ramalingam Raju, he's closer to the failing of Dhritarashtra than of Duryodhana. In other words, he is much more concerned about leaving a company for his two sons. The stake in Satyam of his family dropped to 8%, and they could see it slipping. And certainly with public institutions, with foreign financial institutions who had a stake in the company, he could not guarantee that his sons would succeed. And so he had this weakness, felt that he had to leave a company behind. And that's why the Metas, the infrastructure and the real estate companies were there. And to protect, and of course they required money to be paid to corrupt politicians. And so he dipped into the good company, and suddenly he went from the reformed world of software into the unreformed, deep, dark world of corruption and the unreformed India.
But these forces go on inside us, and they can cause harm to others. You have the story here about some woman in the United States who loses a job, a worker in some firm on Wall Street, and she says, why me? And you may say, oh, that was more greed than it was Ramalinga Raju's case, a greed up in Wall Street. And so someone needs to order the system. So we come back to the state, and we say that maybe the state in India was asleep and is sleeping and preventing, not preventing injustices being done to lots of people. And in the United States, similarly, what was the state doing all this time? Where were the regulations from the state? So we have to wake up the state, as it were, but a state which is not oppressive, but a state which is nurturing, kind, regulating.
That's
goodness.
the secret.
Yes.
That you need not a heavy hand of the state, but a light hand of enlightened regulation. Because the heavy hand of the state leads to the license Raj. And God knows we suffered for 2 generations were lost in this country because of license Raj. So the notion, you see, that's very interesting what you're saying, because the Mahabharata is also wrestling with this problem of moral failure. And the Mahabharata, the answer that the Mahabharata looks to is dharma. And dharma is precisely what you're talking about in terms of the regulation. The only thing is that regulation, good regulation, should not only punish crooks, but also it should reward dharma-like behavior. That's when you get the best out of society. Even the best regulation, Arun, will not catch all the crooks. And so ultimately we have to depend on self-restraint. And that self-restraint is dharma. And that's dharma. And so I think the Mahabharata does have a lesson for us today. What it is saying is that yes, because dharma is also law, and that means regulation, and it uses danda niti, but it also talks, when Yudhishthira talks about ahimsa, andri shamsya, satya, that's dharma, and that's self-restraint. And capitalism depends on every day-to-day transaction in the marketplace needs a promise. You have to believe in the other person. That's how you create trust. And that's another way to think of dharma, as trust within society. I think we have to go for another break, and we'll come back in a minute. Stay with us.